At this point, guys, I would like to show an interview that I recorded yesterday. It's the latest iteration of our candidate segment with Ramona Masacci talking to progressive candidates who have an understanding of MMT who are running for Congress. This is a somewhat special episode in the sense that this is Jason Call. He's actually running in my district. I live in Bellingham, Washington, and you know, Bellingham is part of the district, Washington's second district that Jason is running in. He's running against Rick Larsen, who's one of the most conservative and corrupt Democrats in the entire House. So this was a fantastic interview, and you know, I'm looking forward to seeing Jason as a sitting member of Congress instead of Rick Larsen. So enjoy. This is Jason Call discussing his campaign. I am very happy to be back with our latest iteration of our candidate segment with Ramona Masacci. We're here today with Jason Call, who's running for Congress in Washington State. Hello to Ramona and hello to Jason. Thank you for being here today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on the show to present my campaign.
Welcome, Jason.
Absolutely. Yes, it's great to have you back. If you want to just start by introducing yourself to the audience who may not know you, what brought you into politics? What's your background, and why are you running for Congress?
Well, I'm an activist, first and foremost. I've been an activist for 30 years. I've been an activist since my, freshman year in college back in 1989, anti-war activism. And over the way, across the years, over 30 years now, I've added a repertoire of things that I'm willing to fight for. Not just peace and anti-war issues, but healthcare. I'm on the board of a single payer group here in Washington State. I am very concerned about the environment. I've touched base with a lot of environmental groups here. Last year, I ran in 2020. Last year, I was endorsed by Sunrise Bellingham. I've got the endorsement this year of a youth and climate-oriented PAC called Future Generations. They endorse no corporate money candidates who have a focus on the environment. I think we've been represented by a candidate or an incumbent in this district for over 20 years now. He's in his 11th term in Congress. He's loaded up on money from all of the industries that we are seeking to reduce their influence: polluters, fossil fuel industry, transportation industry, the war machine. So basically all the things that I am trying to fight against to have a better future, he is taking money from and resisting the legislation that we need. He's a very corporate conservative Democrat. He is a Democrat. I've done the research on the American Conservative Union's website. They actually rank all the candidates. And based on his career alignment with the American Conservative Union's priorities, he is the 35th most conservative Democrat in the House. And we're talking, close to 230. He's about 85th percentile most conservative. And so we're on opposite ends of the Democratic Party. I know there's a lot of contention about whether people should run as Democrats, but this is a strongly Democratic district. I have been involved with the Democratic Party for many, many years. I'm always that fringe person kicking at the outside and trying to make change. We're trying to do it again at the federal level. We have got to get better representation in Congress.
Absolutely. And you brought up the corruption of Larsen there. We were actually talking just before this call about his involvement in the Boeing 737 catastrophes. Can you just give a little description of the role that Rick Larsen played in that? Not just Rick Larsen, but the Congress more broadly as well.
Sure. And so, we had talked about this because Netflix has just released a documentary. It's called Downfall. And it's about the 737 MAX crashes that took place with Lion Air and Ethiopian Airlines in 2018, 2019, 346 passengers and crew dead because, when it really comes down to it, It was the post-merger of Boeing and McDonnell Douglas that changed a corporate culture. Boeing was a very safe company prior to that. They were very focused on putting out the most safe aircraft, and their name was gold in the airline industry. So post-merger, the corporate culture changed. They started being more focused on stock prices and less focused on consumer safety and the quality of their products. Well, the FAA is supposed to regulate airline manufacture, and the House Transportation Department, and particularly the House Aviation Subcommittee, is supposed to regulate the FAA. So, what led to these crashes is really a series of failures of government oversight, Boeing's a terrible corporate culture at the time, where they were cutting all sorts of corners. They were in competition with Airbus. They were losing market share. What can we do to get back our market share? They were, we've got documentation from post-crash investigations that they were definitely trying to hide design flaws, that they weren't willing to put things on paper that would lead back to any sort of culpability on their part should things go wrong. But and all of that is well and good. This documentary I just watched really puts a ton of responsibility on Boeing for their terrible corporate culture. And as we know, it's not just Boeing. I mean, corporate culture these days, and for the last 20, 30 years since Reagan, has really been absolutely terrible in terms of consumer safety. But really the issue is, what is the role of government here? And Rick Larsen, as chair of aviation, and he's been chair of aviation since Democrats took the House in 2018. Prior to that, he was the ranking minority member for 6 years on the House Aviation Committee. But he takes a bag of money from the airline industry, not the airline industry, but Boeing airline manufacturer industry. In the 6 years since FAA problems were identified in 2013, he's taken $26,000, or he took $26,000 in campaign contributions from Boeing. And what I am really trying to identify here, and this is just part of my campaign in general, but it's really an opportunity for me to highlight this with Rick Larsen being the chair of aviation, with Boeing being the biggest employer in my district. In fact, the largest manufacturing plant in the entire world is right here in my district in Everett, Washington, where they build Boeing jetliners. It's an opportunity for me to say, look, this happened in our backyard. I'm the person who's willing to take this on, because they say the fish rots from the head, and the head right here is government oversight. And we have it sorely lacking. I talk about this frequently, that we shouldn't have corporate campaign contributions, period, right? That's just corruption. But in particular, we should not have people who are chairing committees in Congress that have that regulatory power taking money from the very industries that they are supposed to be regulating. And that is exactly what the problem is with Rick Larsen in regards to the aviation industry. And it's exactly what led to those crashes that killed 346 people.
How come nobody ever holds government responsible, especially when they have the responsibility of oversight? How come we don't see that, where they're saying, oh, the plane crashes, so what went wrong? Let's go to the place of where it went wrong and try to fix this so this doesn't go wrong again. And it's just kind of ignored, thrown under the rug, and then the responsibility is put on the actual industry itself, but then the industry itself isn't even held accountable.
It's a really good question. I mean, I think we've got some serious problems with investigative journalism. Even this documentary, which I want to say was a good documentary, it really nailed what was going on with the corporate culture, and that can be transferred over many, many industries. But I was waiting over this hour and a half that I was watching this documentary. I was waiting for them to start talking about the failure of, they barely touched on the failure of the FAA. They just said Boeing hid a bunch of stuff from the FAA. Well, that's not supposed to happen. right? The FAA is supposed to have the power to regulate those things, and things were brought to them. I like the Department of Transportation's Inspector General had, as early as 2012, started complaining about this program called, well, one, about the culture of fear and retaliation in Boeing, that if, you know, the Boeing engineers knew if they put anything in writing about any kind of design flaw, if they put it in writing, they could stand to lose their jobs. Again, this is like, they don't want anything traced back to any decision makers should something go wrong. But the FAA is supposed to have that power of regulation. They should be able to demand documents. They should be able to know what's going wrong and say, here are the things that we need to change in our regulatory capacity for the protection of community. I mean, the FAA exists for the protection of the consumer. So they weren't doing their job. The Department of Transportation's Inspector General knew that they weren't doing their job and knew that there were problems with Boeing. And then you go to the actual congressional committee that also should have known. If they didn't know, they weren't doing their jobs. So where is the breakdown? I think maybe the breakdown in accountability comes from corporate media. We talk a lot about access. When you start challenging these people who are in positions of power, they start cutting you off from access. So I don't know that's not part of it. So yeah, I mean, I was frustrated with this documentary. Again, an hour and a half waiting. Where is it going to be that the government needs to be held accountable also, like the regulatory bodies need to be held accountable also? And there was nothing in there at all. Nothing. So I don't know.
You know, this Boeing thing, I'm also interested in from another angle. My understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong on this, but my understanding is that Boeing rushed the Max to rushed the development of the Max to compete with Airbus's Neo series of A320s.
Yep.
And when you have only two companies that own such a or control such a large portion of the market, what ends up happening is just a slight piece of background: the pilots on the A320, the new A320 series, did not have to go through simulator training because they already were qualified to fly the 320, right? So right. For an airline, that's a huge advantage in buying Airbus, because they don't have to put their pilots through weeks of training and pay for it. So Boeing refused to acknowledge this new MCAS system, because if they did, then pilots that are currently trained on the old 737s would have had to go through more training to fly the. So can you talk a little bit about how, like, we have this idea that competition creates innovation, but in this case, what actually happened is we rushed a dangerous product to market in order to try to compete. Can you just talk about how that dynamic is somewhat misconstrued in the public?
Well, I mean, it really comes down to, what is your end goal? Is your end goal having a product that is most importantly a safe product, or is the end goal that you have a product that is making your company money? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. So it was the financialization of Boeing that ended up upending what was a very positive corporate culture that was focused on consumer safety. So and I do think, I mean, I think it's a very salient point that you make here, that the competition in the industry, if the pressure is simply to compete and to make money rather than to put out, because when we talk about innovation, we're talking about, can we get a better product? Well, here we weren't talking about getting a better product. I mean, we were getting a different product. It was supposed to be better, but the end goal wasn't actually necessarily a better product. It was to make the company more money, and that was the problem.
Ramona?
So Jason, how is the campaign going? Are you able to reach your voters?
Well, we're working on it. You know, everything is money right now. I mean, we've come close to we're about to hit $95,000 total raised, which I'm pretty proud of. We raised $80,000 in 2020. No, was it 2021? I forget the year we're in, but in 2022 we've added close to another $15,000 on that in the last 6 weeks, which is not bad for a no corporate money campaign. We've got some good regular contributors. We would like to have more. We don't take any corporate PAC money. We do need to get materials printed. We are we're pretty much solely running on social media and an email program right now. But we do have a lot of volunteers in district who are waiting for us to get materials in hand. And hopefully we'll be able to do that within the next 2 to 3 weeks. So I would just say to people, if you're interested in unseating a terrible corporate candidate and putting a real progressive in place, who is going to do, and I don't want to, there's a lot of argumentation in the Twitter spaces that what is going to be different about you. We put the squad in there and the squad isn't doing anything. I disagree that the squad isn't doing anything at all. I think there are a few members of the squad who are doing really the best they can. I'm a big fan of Rashida Tlaib and Cori Bush. I won't go much further than that. So there are some things that members of the squad have done that have been good. Has it been consistent? No, it has not. Have they challenged power the way they have needed to? No, they have not. So I want people to know that, like, if they're going to invest in my campaign, I'm going in there to swing bats. Right, our climate's fallen off a cliff. People are dying from COVID, but dying from our healthcare system anyway. I have no I've been an activist for 30 years. Like, if I go in there and it doesn't work out, what are you going to do that's going to be different? I will do everything I can. I'm not there to hold on to a congressional seat. I'd say as much as I am there to be that person that draws attention to issues that need to be changed. If I've got to be a loud voice, as I have done in the past in all of my other activism, then that is my job. My job is to go in there and swing bats. If I've got to slow down bad things because I refuse to vote for something, then I will slow down bad things from happening. I don't want people to have this idea that me as a single individual can go in there and change everything that's going on. That's, that would be absolutely ridiculous. But I want to say to the people online who have lost faith in the political system, give me a shot and see what it's like when somebody goes in there who, if I can be so bold, gives no fucks. I am living with my kids as teens and the future that they are going to have to deal with me being working class, my wife being working class, us dealing with student loans, us dealing with the healthcare system. I am you, right? I am not, I don't have a bank account. All my assets, I have a house and I have a mortgage, right? And I have a retirement for the 18 years that I worked as a teacher. That, by the way, because my wife was in school for the last 2.5, 3 years, and was not able to work full time. At the age of 51 years, I'm not 51 yet, I'm 50. But at the age of 50 years old, I've had to dip into my retirement over the last year just to make sure I can make ends meet. So when people think that, I've got some ultimate agenda to just get myself rich and to just cozy up to politicians, and, I have experienced, and lived working class life for the last 30 years, activist life for the last 30 years, have done my damnedest to make change everywhere that I have. And that's what I'm going to do when I'm in Congress. I am not ingratiating myself to anybody at all. I'm there to work for the people.
I am so glad to hear that, because I think there is this sort of lack of nuance when we talk about progressive politicians, right? And I think some people do have this expectation that if you elect one or two people, the whole world is going to change, and then they end up inevitably quite disappointed. But one of my disappointments with, and again, I take a nuanced view on these individuals, but one of my disappointments with AOC is she came in with kind of that mentality. She did the sit-in with Pelosi, and it seemed like, over time, she became a little bit less vocal and aggressive about these kinds of things. So how do you deal with the institutional pressures that are faced by members of Congress to sort of maintain that role as an activist that's kind of an outside pressure on the whole system?
Well, first of all, like I said, I am not there, and this is kind of a weird thing to say, because I think when you go in, you're like, yeah, I want to hold this seat and do as much good as I possibly can. I am going to get attacked by the system. If I get elected, there is no doubt that they're going to try and marginalize me. They're going to try and attack me. I have been, I don't know if I've told either of you the story, and we've had conversations, Ramona, we have had conversations in the past. I spent 4 years on the Washington State Democrat Central Committee. I got elected because when Bernie ran in 2016, I gathered a whole lot of Bernie people and I said, let's go take over the state Democratic Party. I know how to do this. And so we made some inroads to taking over local Democratic Party organizations, people in his chair, people in his county committee, people in his state committee. I myself got elected to the state committee, where I go and I start, writing resolutions that we should not be taking corporate money. And these resolutions pass, right? They pass. The body says. But the truth is, the state Democratic Party is very much controlled by the DNC. And we did not have enough people, like, maybe 35% of the people who got elected to the Washington State Democrats State Committee were those truly progressive types. And I was very much a leadership voice of that. Well, what happens is they turn around, they come after me personally. Jason's a bully. Jason has no decorum. Jason doesn't know when to, Jason's threatening. Right? Because Jason is so passionate about these issues and he doesn't take any bullshit from anybody. I'm all of a sudden a bully. And they actually suspended me from the Washington State Democrats State Committee for 6 months on completely bullshit charges. There were a couple of things that I did do. I cut down a Confederate flag, and they came after me for conduct unbecoming cutting down a
God forbid.
And I was serious. I was like, you really are going to, that's the fight you guys want to have? But they threw in a whole bunch of like, Jason's a bully and Jason makes, like, as I was going around the district trying to get local Democratic Party endorsements, they even started filtering in there that, Jason's been abusive to women. Like, they will stop, honest to God, in terms of personal attacks. They will stop at nothing to make sure true progressive voices are marginalized. And when they can't go after you on policy, they can't compete on policy, because the truth is, I had a hand in rewriting the state party's platform to be as progressive as it has ever been. Right? I mean, that was a lot of my work and my allies' work on the state committee. I challenged the party chair. I challenged for the party chairship in 2018, and the liberals were horrified. Like, why would you change? Why would you challenge this? We've got an LGBTQ woman as chair of, and she's a Microsoft exec. She's a complete corporatist. I'm not into this identity politics thing. I want good policy. So that was my issue. So they go after me for being for personal reasons, rather than having an honest debate about policy. And that's really what I'm trying to present to the voters in this district, right? This is a safe blue seat. There's no chance that a Republican will get elected in this district, even though that they've made it slightly more conservative. It's not going to happen. Republicans don't invest in this district. Tim Hazelow, who ran, if you remember, Luke, because you're up in Bellingham. Are you still up in Bellingham?
Yes, yeah? I am. And I do remember, yes.
I don't think he raised more than $30,000, and he was like the establishment Republican choice. They're not going to dump money into a race that they know they're going to lose, right? So it's a safe blue district. And what I am presenting to the voters of this district, to the Democratic voters and to the left voters, is we need a debate within the Democratic Party about what it is that we stand for. Because, I'm at the end of and that was the debate I was having on the state committee. I'm not a corporatist, right? I don't mind saying I'm a socialist. Does that mean me being elected is all of a sudden going to turn our government into a socialist government? No, it means that we have an expanse of voices and we have a diversity of voices, and having a socialist in there saying this is what we need is part of that, right? But they want to completely marginalize that. I call them out on their corporatism. Rick Larsen, the guy I'm running against, in the fourth quarter of 2021, raised almost 70% of his funding from PACs, most of it corporate PACs, right? So, who do you want to be represented by? I am as Shirley Chisholm said in 1972, unbought and unbossed, and I'm in there to do the work of the people. I will swing bats. Now, if the voters of this district get that choice and they still choose to go with the corporatists, then hey, I did what I could do. I presented them with an option of how they wanted to be represented. They opted to have the same guy who's been in there for 22 years. Fine. I'll do the best I can to make my case. If I get in there and I get marginalized, which I will, I'm just going to say they're going to do their best to marginalize me as a representative. I am going to come back to this district at every single opportunity and tell people what is going on in Washington. And, it's not going to be the Republicans that are going to marginalize me. They're going to, they'll do the same thing to me that they do to AOC and, they're, these crazy socialists. But the real marginalization is going to come from within the Democratic Party. They are going to try and silence me. And I want to be able to go back to my district and tell my voters, you elected me because you knew what I stood for. And here's the Democratic Party trying to silence me. Now, is that what you want? Go ahead. Sorry.
I want to pass it to Ramona, but you mentioned something that I just really want to drive home because I've seen this so many times. The last person we interviewed was Shahid Buttar. He had a similar campaign launched against him. This happened to Alex Morse, who ran against Richie Neal. And it, to me, it is particularly disgusting because it is minimizing a very serious issue and politically cynically weaponizing that issue to try to suppress progressives. So I just want to make sure the audience look out for these disingenuous smear campaigns against anti-establishment progressives. That is just nauseating that they would try to do that to you, Jason. I just wanted to make sure that point got driven home. And Ramona, if you want to go ahead.
Appreciate that.
So once you get into Congress, how are you going to decouple policy, social policy, from spending that draws its spending from taxation instead of having it fully federally funded so that the spending is able to be more open and it's not limited?
Well, I mean, there's just a lot of education that goes along, and I know you're referring to the deficit myth and MMT, and I just we saw in media just a week ago where people like Larry Summers, literally the people who had a hand in crashing the economy because of their terrible policies, and not just the economy for this country, but the economy for the entire world, come out and poo-poo modern monetary theory without even really sort of taking into the scope of why we aren't able to get the things spent on in this country that we really need, that are of benefit. I mean, Larry Summers' angle is making sure that Wall Street is still working for the wealthy. My angle is making sure our government is doing everything it can for the majority of people that pretty much get ignored by the policymakers in DC. So, I think that there's got to be a lot of education. I'll be taking my copy of the deficit myth with me to Washington. And I know that we've got some allies there, like Representative Yarmouth, who was really sort of given MMT some good consideration and understands the policies and is willing to try some things. But we've got to build that coalition. So I'm there to build that coalition that says, our goal, and I think Marianne Williamson, as you probably know, is a big supporter of my candidacy. She said something. I'm trying to think about the term. We've got to change our economy from a profit-driven economy. I'm not sure if that's how she characterized it, but to a humanitarian-based economy. The goal of government is to take care of its citizens. And if we're not taking care of our citizens, then it's a failing government, right? And so we have been a failing government for decades upon decades. And so that's the consciousness that we really need to change. It's going to be a very difficult job because people like the guy I'm challenging, Rick Larsen, they got money in their ears, Larsen came from a lobbying background. He was a lobbyist for 6-8 years prior to getting elected to my, where I live right now, the local county council, where he served for 2 years before getting elevated to go to Congress. So he came from a lobbying background, and I'm sure he's got a great lobbying job waiting for him as soon as whenever he gets out of Congress. So he's set. He knows where his bread is buttered. But I'm there to, like I said, I'm there to make sure I can get the best policy I can for the American people. And that is healthcare, and that is education, that is green transportation systems, that's a federal jobs guarantee. These are the things that are going to make us a better country, right? So again, what is the purpose of government? If the purpose of government is not to take care of all of your people, then you've got a failed governmental model, right? And it's a failed governmental mindset. That's what we've got to break. We've got a failing governmental mindset that we absolutely have to break.
Can I just rephrase one thing that you said there? Rick has a nice lobbying job for him when you beat him and take him out of Congress. He will have a nice lobbying job waiting for him. I
try to have a little bit of humility here and not make any assumptions, but
that's all right. I'll be cocky on your behalf. How about that?
Thank you. I mean, the reality is, for a candidate like myself, it's an uphill battle. There's no doubt that it's an uphill battle. I have chosen for the arguments that I have with people online about, I shouldn't be doing this. I'm literally choosing the most difficult path to get elected. If my only goal was to just go get elected and have a nice cushy job in Congress, I'd be taking the corporate money, because that's the
you wouldn't be running as a progressive.
I'd be telling you lies. I'd get myself elected, and I'd turn around and give you the bird. That's not my goal.
And then you'd have millions of dollars backing you behind that, and tons of people not paying attention and just voting for you because they see your name on TV.
And I would do exactly what Rick Larsen did, which is, as soon as he got elected in 2000, he moved himself to Bethesda, Maryland, and he represents the district from across the country. He's got himself a nice home in Bethesda, Maryland, just a few miles away from all of the weapons manufacturers and war machine headquarters. So,
So Jason, I was hoping you could talk a little bit about, we were talking before we were recorded today about there was some redistricting and this last year, but can you just talk about what is your district like? It happens to also be my district, but what is our district like? And how are you planning to appeal to this district? And then secondarily, I know during a pandemic it can be difficult to do some of the normal campaign things, but what is the plan to do outreach and to get your message out there?
Sure. So about the district, our district starts at the Snohomish-King County line, which is, about 20 miles north of Seattle. Snohomish is the county north of King County. And it had previously just gone up to Bellingham, about 2/3 of the way through Bellingham, fell short of the Canadian border by, I want to say, about 15 miles, maybe 20 miles. About 20 miles, and included the San Juan Islands and Whidbey Island, Camano Island, like the big islands in the North Puget Sound, extended maybe 15 miles inward to a little bit beyond the I-5 corridor, which runs north-south from like Olympia all the way up to Vancouver. But it's a mix of, prior to this prior to this census, right? So we get new information on demographics with the census. We'd been about an 88% white district. The new census puts us around, I think, the high 60s. So we have increased, diversity, non-white population in this district by about 20%, which is huge over the last decade. We've got a lot of immigrant families coming in. We have a mix of urban. We don't have like real urban, like Seattle urban, big city urban, but we've got Everett and Linwood, which are ostensibly, extended suburbs of Seattle. And then we've got College Town, Bellingham, and we've got a couple of naval bases. We've got the Whidbey Island naval base, and then we've got the naval base here in Everett. So, I sort of military culture, like, it's part of the economy, but I think it's much less part of the economy than people tend to give it credit for. Like, I think there are only about 8,000 employees at the Oak Harbor Naval Base. And not all of them are conservatives. There's maybe a misnomer that anybody who's involved in the military is necessarily a conservative, because I've got friends who have run for office on Whidbey Island who are enlisted members of the Navy, and they are very much socialist. They don't say it out loud too much, but they and they're impacted. That's actually one of the things about being in the military, especially if you're enlisted. You don't get paid very much. I mean, military housing is extremely substandard. So I would just say, to military members out there, I want to improve conditions for serving members of the military. I want to substantially reduce our military spending, but I do want to make conditions better for the people who are serving in the military. We've got more coastline in this district than most districts in the country. We stand to be substantially impacted by rising tides. One of the things that came out just recently, like less than a week ago, is NOAA had identified that a 1 foot rise in sea level is inevitable if we don't do something immediately about the climate change, right? Well, 1 foot rise, that is going to impact a ton of places in our district, right? So, we got a lot of concerns. There are some real concerns here in this district about what the future is going to be when it comes to military spending, when it comes to climate. You probably know about the Growler program that's based in Whidbey Island. That is a huge concern for locals. And if people don't know, when we talk about what is a specifically local issue, the Navy has the entire fleet of their converted F-18s. They're called EA-18s. They're electronic surveillance jets, but they're flying morning, noon, and night, and have been for over a decade. We got decades long like local resident complaints. These things are flying at like 130 decibels, overpopulated areas, morning, noon, and night. I mean, I got people who are filming the noise. They're like, listen to this. They're 2 miles away from the runway. They're inside their house, and the noise is still 90 decibels, right? So 85 decibels at prolonged exposure is going to cause hearing loss. And these things in open air fly at 130 decibels. Some people are fine with it because they're like, they use the jets means jobs. For me, it does an incredible amount of environmental damage, an incredible amount of, just to our marine life, an incredible amount of noise pollution for our local residents. And I want to tackle this in as much as I can. Taking on the military industrial complex is a monumental task, but it's a really important thing to residents here locally.
One more district specific thing, Jason. Can you talk about how Washington is an open primary state? The idea that you may be aiding a Republican's attempt to unseat Rick Larsen is very often disingenuously used against progressive challengers. Can you talk about that dynamic?
Yeah, I mean, we have primaries the same way California has primaries, which means whoever files for the seat, you end up with the top two vote getters. Now, I'm going into this primary under the assumption that Rick Larsen is going to get the top number of votes. He's got the name recognition. There are definitely some conservative Democrats here who do not want to see me elected. But the general feeling in the Democratic Party here is a more progressive bent. That is how I'm making my case as I'm going around to all of the local Democratic Party organizations, and there's 14 of them, 5 counties, 9 legislative districts, and I got to go talk to all of them, and I got to plead my case. And what I say is there is absolutely no harm in our district for having me and Rick Larsen on the ballot next to each other, right? So first of all, if he and I are on the ballot, you've eliminated all Republicans. So you're going to get a Democrat one way or the other. Your choice. You want a conservative Democrat, you want a progressive Democrat. Rick beats every Republican 2-1 in since 2010. The only time he's ever come within a couple of percentage points of losing his seat since he first got elected in 2000 is in 2010. If you remember 2010, it was after the first half of Obama's first term, where everybody was really disenchanted with the Obama administration, and there was a massive wave of Democratic losses all over the country. I think Democrats, they said, lost over 1,000 seats for either in Congress or in state legislatures. And Rick Larsen almost lost his seat back then, but he still squeezed it out by a couple of percentage points. Since then, he has beaten every Republican 2-1. And like I said, the Republicans don't invest in this district. In 2018, it was a libertarian who was on the ballot. The Republicans didn't even field a candidate who could have, gotten that second place spot. And of course, Rick beat the libertarian 2-1. So if I am the person, very outside chance that I am the only Democrat against a Republican, I'll beat the Republican. If Rick is the only Democrat against a Republican, he's going to beat the Republican. So the best scenario for this district is let's just eliminate the Republicans in the primary and have a D-on-D race. There's no danger in it at all. And it actually gives the voters a choice that they have never had before. And the other thing is it puts Larsen on the spot, like, to defend his record. It gives him, and he can defend himself. That's fine. I mean, he's terrible at it when he's pressured. But for me to say, here's why you shouldn't, here's what I'm going to do. But look, here's really why this guy has not been a good representative for you over the last 20 years. Voters have never had an opportunity to examine his record in a serious way. And I think that they deserve that chance.
Do you think that Rick Larsen would debate you once you win the primary?
He may be forced to. He certainly won't debate me pre-primary. But he may be compelled to by local Democratic Party organizations. I want people watching this to know that I do have, there are 5 counties in the district. I have the support of at least 3 of those county chairs. Some more openly, some less openly. But I've got good support within the Democratic Party. Like, a lot of people are really itching for a change. A lot of people really don't like Rick Larsen. So he may be forced into it. And I tell you what, if we get post primary and he refuses to debate, I'm just gonna go forward in this case. It's why this guy's bad. It's one of the reasons why this guy is bad. He's not willing to be accountable.
If he debates you, he loses. That's it.
Yeah.
He just loses because there's no way he can defend himself.
No, I've got the goods. That's why for the entirety of the 2020 campaign season, as I was in Zoom meetings with him, and I'm looking at him and he's looking at me in these Zoom meetings, and we're making our case for endorsement. He talked about the inevitable Republican that he was going. Even he was just openly dismissive of my campaign, and he's doing the exact same thing right now. He is not, even when I'm right there in the room, he is openly dismissive of my campaign. Personally, I think it's coming off badly, because I get to say right away, look at this guy saying he's 100% sure that he's going to be against a Republican in the district. And the other interesting thing is, actually, I wrote a Facebook post on this at about 3:00 in the morning because I'm up thinking about these things a lot. He messages out. He doesn't talk about policy a whole lot when he messages out to his email list. I'm on his email list, and my Oppo research guy is on his email list, and we analyze everything that he sends out. He talks frequently about protecting the House from Republicans. Well, he knows full well that this seat is not in danger of being lost to a Republican. But here's the other thing, and I think this is the more interesting point about that. He votes with the Republicans a lot. Like I said at the beginning, he has an extremely conservative career voting record, 35th most conservative of sitting House Democrats right now. That means he votes against the Democratic Party a lot. Is that what the Democrats in this district want? They want somebody who very often sides with the Republicans, like to roll back Dodd-Frank regulations, right? To repeal the estate tax, and Dodd-Frank regulations twice. Like right after Dodd-Frank was instituted, he started going after them, and then there was a thing that in 2018 where a number of Democrats were really chastised for going after it, and he was one of them. Talking to the LGBTQ community, he talks a good game about protecting LGBTQ rights, but when the big decisions were coming down and I forget the names, Obergefell and was it Windsor, basically repealing the Defense of Marriage Act, and then federally legalizing gay marriage. A number of Democrats, a large number of Democrats, had written letters to the Supreme Court and said, we want you to repeal these things. He was absent from both of those. He does not step out in front on any issues at all. A lot of the LGBT community doesn't know that. But, like there were maybe 20 to 30 Democrats who didn't sign on to those letters, right? This is a big thing for the Democratic Party, making sure that minority rights are protected. He didn't sign on to them at all. If you'll notice his Twitter feed right now, it's Black History Month. He is retweeting a whole bunch of, this was the first Black person in history to do this, and Bessie Coleman, and these are all good things, right? That's great. This is Black history. He has never been out in front on police, on criminal justice reform, on police accountability. He does not mention Black Lives Matter. The first time he ever said Black Lives Matter was in the wake of the George Floyd riots. Never said a thing about Mike Brown and Ferguson. Never said a thing about Freddie Gray or Sandra Bland or any of the high profile Black people who have been killed by police, unjustly in this country. Doesn't say a word about them. Once it was kind of safe to say something about, and then he got all behind, yes, I'm 100%, we have to be behind the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. But prior to that, no leadership whatsoever. And all he is a name on it, right? He doesn't get out there and actually advocate for any of this stuff. He's not a leader in any sense. And to that point, of all the people all the Democrats who were elected in 2000, who are still in office, and there's far too many of them, quite frankly, he has the least floor speaking time of any of them, So
he just doesn't care.
Well, I don't think he does. Like I said, he knows he's got a lobbying job waiting for him. He's very performative on, like, I've had people tell me, this campaign season, that the way he is messaging to his email lists, completely different. Like he has been proud of being a moderate in the past. He has been proud of bipartisanship in the past. But they're saying he is messaging out like he's a progressive, right? And it's because I'm challenging him. It is wild that when he puts email asks out, he's like, can you contribute $3 to this grassroots campaign? He's trying to drive down the fact that his average contribution is something like $800. A lot of it comes from corporate PACs. So here I am, and I get to say, hey, listen, I've had over 4,300 contributions right now, and my average is about $22, and no corporate PAC money whatsoever. So, who's the real grassroots environmentalist progressive? Talks about himself being, bold FDR like, and it's, I think people are really seeing through it.
There's this amazing trick that I think you're talking to. I mean this very broadly, but there seems to be this amazing trick that Democrats engage in where they get to portray themselves as the most anti-Trump people, and yet the progressives that they're running against somehow get portrayed as like, you're going to help Republicans. And it never ceases to amaze me, right? Like you vote with them half the time, and you want to take this label of like, I'm the most anti-Trump person in the room. I mean, can you talk a little bit about that dynamic? It's insane to me.
Well, I mean, it's capitalizing on this, I think there's a very real fear. People have this fear of somebody like Trump because, I think the worst thing about Trump is that, obviously he's corrupt. Obviously he's a charlatan, but I think he does put fear into marginalized communities because he is such a flagrant racist, misogynist, xenophobe. And so I think that there's a very real fear that the establishment Democrats disingenuously tap into. I think it works because, you know, when you start arguing with older Democrats and they start bringing up this, like, you're gonna, you know, why would you challenge a good Democrat? And I have to talk to them about, he's not actually a good Democrat. I don't know what your idea of a Democrat is, but for me, he's not a good Democrat. He votes, so, but like you said, it's disingenuous, and it's trying to tap into a real, very real fear. I don't want to dismiss the fear that people have that we could end up with someone worse than Trump. But that was what I said about, the danger of electing somebody like Biden, who was not going to do anything for people, is that the backlash would be you would end up with somebody potentially worse than Trump in 2024. And I think we're seeing that right now. I think it's almost seems to be almost a foregone conclusion in a lot of the establishment media that the Democrats are going to get creamed in 2022 at the congressional level. And rather than be honest about why that is, which is like, you guys aren't getting it done. I don't, you can blame Joe Manchin, you can blame Kirsten Sinema, but you're not getting it done because you're a corporate-based party that never wanted to get it done in the first place. That was not your goal. You shit all over Bernie when he was the person who was going to get things done, and you shut him down because he was the person who was going to get things done, and he was going to expose, all of the corruption. Well, you're part of the corruption too. So, there's a ton of hubris that is going to have to be swallowed here in the next couple of years.
Jason, I cannot wait to see you in Congress. I'm been a huge supporter of yours since last election cycle. I've gotten to know you over the last few years, and you've just been so consistent throughout, all this time. And I am so grateful that you're running. Can you tell people how to find you, how they can support you?
Sure. Everything I can be located at Call for Congress. There you go. You see the website right there, callforcongress.com. Please sign up for my mailing list. I put out an email almost every day. Some of them are direct, like, hey, give me money. Some of them are issues related. We have started doing press releases now. We were waiting until after the new year to kind of get our press release game going. But we got picked up in the Cascadia Daily News recently. Hey, Jason Calls challenging Rick Larsen, and a couple of other outlets have picked us up also. So we're going to continue doing press releases. We are in the process of finalizing our press release on the Boeing issue. I think that will probably go out on Monday because nobody else is talking about the lack of congressional oversight. We're really hoping that some media outlets will run with this story because it is absolutely part of the problem. But there you see, at Call for Congress, that's Twitter. I speak my mind on Twitter, sometimes not in a professional way, but when people, but this is the thing, when people say, oh, you're not professional, I'll drop an F-bomb here or there because I think it's warranted. People say, oh, you're not professional. I'd say, look around you at what the professionals have done. This is what the professionals have done to us. Right. So no,
Yeah.
you call me, you say I'm not a professional. I wear that as a badge of honor. No, I am not a professional politician. I'm here to kick ass and take names, as they say, do that the best we can. Absolutely appreciate the opportunity. Ramona, always great to see you. Thank you. And I'll see you guys both out in the social media spaces.